Good morning and welcome to Homebrew Haven. I'm your host, Matthew. Today we're going to be working with the Colorado Brewing Brew in a Basket. We're going to be working with some IPA grain. Added a little bit of chocolate to it just to enhance the flavor a little bit. I like chocolate a lot. We're going to be working with a brand new yeast today too. Promises to be exciting. We'll be right back. Alright, we're going to go ahead and add the grains in. I left the motor running to get the water circulating because it's been, in my opinion, that the motor actually helps when you're adding the grains to the basket. And I'm adding them roughly a cup at a time, getting it stirred in. The biggest thing here is to make sure we don't have any airlocks. Brewing a basket's a little bit difficult from that standpoint because it's not your standard gravity. And as such, when you're not working with gravity, you're working with the pump, you're at the mercy of the pump. The last show that I had to work with, I learned an awful lot about this machine. This time it should go real smooth. Slowly stirring it in there, make sure we don't have any airlocks. For the person who's beginning with all grain, like I am, I had to learn from last week's where you just got to make sure you don't have any air in there. So we're going to take a little break. I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of the grains to it, and we'll be right back. Alright, we're just about through adding our grains here. I'm going to turn the heat up just a little bit. So far so good this week with the pot. Like I said last week, I've got some clips I'm going to be adding in on my experiment with this pot for the first time. And a lot of times I kept saying, you know what, it's probably user error. It's probably an awful lot of newness. You know, I'm sort of a newbie when it comes to all grain brewing. So, to be honest with you, last week was a disaster. I'm going to have some outtakes at the end of the show. But the beer still came out great. We did a chocolate rye. And this week we're doing sort of a jade IPA. I added a little bit of chocolate to this one. I added 2 pounds of chocolate just for the coloring and the flavor. As you can see right here, we've got a solid dark wort we're working with now. We're just about ready to mash this bad boy out. We're going to be right back, and stay with us. All right, we just about got the grains all in here. I'm bringing it up to a mash temperature of roughly 156, 157. I can't be precise for this setup that I have here, but I can get as close as possible. I've got about that much grain left to put in there. I'm going to add a little bit more water to it. I'm using all natural spring water for this. I don't use tap water. And we're going to be ready to get the rest of this grain in here and get everything going. And once again, I am working with the Colorado Brewing System's Brew Pod. Total cost on this is roughly about $500. That's with the motor and everything. The motor does not come with an on-off switch, so I used a power strip over there to do that for me. I have a vent fan going over here to pull some of the steam out. We're just about finished adding the grain. And the temperature's holding at about 157. I added some water earlier. I'm going to add a little bit more water. And what I'm doing right now to make sure I don't get any air bubbles for the new all grain brewers, like myself, I add about 3 cups of grain, stir it in. Meanwhile, I'm bringing the temperature up, and then I'm going to mash it out. I'm going to set my handy-dandy old-fashioned timer for an hour, and then I'm going to mash it out for an hour, and maybe just a little bit longer, because of the volume I'm working with. The water levels are extremely low here. So as soon as I get this in here, I'm going to add a little bit more water to it. Once more, I am using all natural spring water. I'm not going to get into the argument of which one's better. I happen to like how spring water tastes. All right. We're adding just our last little bit of grain in here. I'm getting that mixed in real well. Alright, we're back. I am finished adding my grains to it in just a minute. I'm going to add about 3 cups of oatmeal, roughly about a pound, because I like the flavor that oatmeal gives. It gives a little bit more of a robust flavor to it. This started out as an IPA, but most of you homebrewers realize you start off with something, you're like, wow, I'd like to add this, or wow, I'd like to add that. And that's how I do my brews. And fortunately, very fortunately, this pot will actually accommodate changing on the fly. Don't have to change anything up or anything. Got the brew going on right here in the basket. Got a level can so we can actually see what's going on there as well. Got the temperature up once again to about 150, 155. And in just a minute I'm going to add a little bit more water to it so we can raise the levels up. And at that point we'll be ready to mash in. That's some good looking wort there. Good looking mash. Good looking. Very good looking. Alright, we're back. I am going to be adding just a little bit of water in here. I'm going to tell you once again, I did add a couple of parts to it. It shipped without the thermometer, shipped without the external stuff as well. But what it did ship with was the motor, all the parts you need here, there, and there. The only thing I had to really add was the tubing, the fittings for the motor, and the thermometer. Once again, we're working with the Colorado Brew pot. Colorado Brewing is an actual company out in Colorado. I know that sounds kind of redundant. They make pots for home brewers, and quite frankly, when I was looking around for something that would actually work. So when I found it, I went with this. Pretty soon we're going to be hoping to bring you some stuff from Spadell. We're also going to be hoping to bring you some Blickman engineering equipment in the coming season. But for right now, we're going to be working with the Colorado Brewers Brew Pot. Excellent pot, very sturdy. I can rest my hand here, 150 degrees, not getting burned. Don't need the covers to hold the handle up or anything like that. Other than that, I mean, it really is a lot of pot for the money. It's a lot of pot for what you would expect out of something costing closer to $1,000, maybe $1,500. They're about a third of the price. They were featured on Discovery back in December. I saw it and I said, you know what, this is definitely worth the price of admission. I think I'm definitely going to go with this pot. It was a good pot. I'm enjoying it so far. And one of the big things was once I learned how to use it, that was the big kicker, was learning how to actually use it. On a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the most difficult for the new home brewer, I would definitely have to rate this one at least a 3 because of the learning curve, having to put stuff together. If you've just done extract brewing in your pot, you got your little extract kit, and you heat your water up, you mix all the extract in there, and you let your bags hang there for a little while, get the flavor of the beer in there, and then you just go ahead and boil it, slap your hops in there, cool it down, and get it ready to go. There's definitely a learning curve here. It was a learning curve for me. As you'll see in some of our outtakes from last week's attempt at a show. But this week we seem to have it all together, and I'm very happy with it. We're going to be moving forward here into the mash period in just a minute. And I'm going to go through setting the dial and getting the water set to sparge a little bit more in there. Those terms I use are probably not exactly accurate, but then again, show me someone who's perfect. We'll be right back after this commercial break, and we'll have all the water in, I'll have everything up to temperature, and we'll be ready to mash. Stay with us. We're back on Homebrew Haven right now. Water temperature is sitting at 135, trying to get it up to speed now. Going to be shutting the pump off for a few minutes, let the water heat up. Thank you for joining us back here at the Homebrew Haven. I've got my extra water added. And as you can see from right here, the circulation pump's working really well. And on top of all that, I've got my little handy dandy timer. I'm still old-fashioned like that. It's been going roughly for about 4 minutes now. We usually mash out at about an hour. I'm at 156 degrees in oven. So at this stage, we're just going to let it mash out, and then we're going to be ready to go to boil. All right, we're back at the Homebrew Haven today. Once again, working with the Colorado Brew Pot. I have my mash up to 156, and I've got my handy-dandy old-fashioned timer. Don't use the digital one just yet. We're going to be mashing this out for about an hour, give or take. And from that point, we'll be ready to move to brew stage. Once again, we are working with an all-grain IPA that I added a couple pounds of chocolate to. And in roughly about 20 more minutes, I'm going to add a pound of oatmeal and let that sparge in late. And from there, we're just going to let it mash out. And then from there, we're going to go to the brew cycle. I'm going to be adding 6 different hops, very good flavors. Overall, we're looking forward to a good day here. Once again, there will be outtakes from our previous attempt at this show, just for comedy effect. I had learned how to use this pot. On a scale of 1 to 10, at this stage of it, I would say that we're an easy 5. Moving into 6 on difficulty range if you are a first-time all-grain brewer. If you are a regular all-grain brewer, then it's just a matter of adjusting your mash to the brew in a basket as opposed to the gravity stage with the false bottom and hot liquor tank and everything else. This seeks to kind of make it all into one compact thing, and for the new brewer, like myself, I just can't say enough about how easy this pot for me was to learn. Now, it may look like it was horrific last week, and in some stages it actually was, but overall, ease of use, I'm giving this one at least a 10 at this point. Once I learned that you have to adjust your own water flow because it's not adjustable at the pump, things like that, things I just, honest to goodness, did not know. I'm learning as well as everyone else, so why not? Welcome back to the Homebrew Haven. We are at the halfway point on the mashup. We're at about 30 minutes now. The way this system is designed, it should give you roughly about 80% efficiency on your grains, and I can definitely see that the grains are circulating well, even though pretty much I have the basket full. So kudos to Colorado Brewing for an excellent design, excellent basket design. I have roughly about 5 gallons of water in here right now, maybe closer to 6. It's a 10-gallon pot total. But the grains are definitely circulating through. They're starting to get a good aroma. Starting to get everything kind of the way I want it to smell. I'm getting the good aroma altogether. And frankly, at this rate here, we should be ready to boil in roughly about 25 more minutes. I just can't say enough about how well this pot works, even for the first-time user, because this is actually my second time using the pot. First time, worked out all the kinks, which I hope you had a good laugh during the outtakes from the previous attempt at this show. And I gotta say, it was frustrating. But once I worked out all the kinks, this pot seems to be doing all great for me perfectly. This is all great, no extracts. I'm going to be working with chocolate and some additional grains, which I will list periodically through here. I did add 2 cups of oatmeal just for a little bit of extra something to it, because oatmeal and chocolate are my 2 favorites. And if you've got a favorite that you like, you pretty much know what I'm talking about here. There is no excuse for what you want. With this pot right here, you can definitely have what you want when you want it. Overall, it's a great experience so far. We've got about 25 more minutes on the mash out, and then we get to my least favorite part of dealing with brewing a basket. When you do not have a jack, you'll have to remove the basket. Welcome back to the Homebrew Haven. I'm your host, Matthew. We are using the Colorado brewing pot. We're going through this whole cycle of brew. Got about an hour left on this now. I'm going to be starting out with my Centennial. I do have a mixing cup. I'm going to be putting 2 full ounces of Centennial in to start. This is definitely going to be a hoppy beer. All right, here we go. One of the helpful things that I find when I'm brewing, you can definitely do it the way you want to. There's no real set way. Back when I wasn't paying attention to the ecology, I used to have a bunch of styrofoam cups, and I had my hops all set up in the styrofoam cups, and I was ready to add. Now that I've become a little bit more environmentally conscious than I was before, little mixing cup, just keep it dried out, holds everything, easy to sanitize, and all you do is just keep adding your hops. And it's just a matter of training yourself. Keep an eye on your timer, training yourself to be more responsible to the environment. All right, that's about all you're ever going to hear me talk about on that part. But we only have one of them, guys. One. Ladies and gentlemen, we have one environment. We've got to take care of it. The less waste, the better. Recycle often. I often recycle my jugs. And every once in a while, when I run into a situation where I can refill them, I just use the same jugs. There are dispensers now. If you live in a highly populated area, there are dispensers that will actually dispense spring water. You got to try to figure out how that happens, but it does it for about 35, 37 cents a gallon. Saves money, saves on the environment. So as we were talking earlier, I just started off with 2 ounces of Centennial hops. I'm going to use Cascades at the 15-minute mark, and then I'm going to finish up with the Simcoe. And for the last 5 minutes, I'm going to do Columbus, and I'm going to dry hop it with Chinook. And I am getting ready to add my Cascade. Got about 1 more minute here. Once again, can't emphasize the importance enough of being ecologically conscious. Using my measuring cup, and in roughly about 30 seconds here, I'm going to be adding this in. As you can tell in there, we've got a pretty good boil going. Pushing about 218, right at the boil temperature for a light boil. I don't like the vigorous boil, some people do, and some recipes will actually call for that. If it calls for it, it's okay to get it up just a little bit hotter. Me, I like a light boil personally. Once again, that's a preference. All right, we're getting ready to add them. And of course, the reaction that it has with it causes the bowl to pick up just a little bit. As always, we keep our handy-dandy stir, and I always tend to rinse it off. Make sure we've got us a good rinse going on there. Once again, we are using the Colorado Brew pot from Colorado Brewing. They were featured back in December on the Discovery Channel. This is a solid pot, and by solid I mean I can rest my hand here, I'm not burning it. The heat is evenly distributed. Very good. Using a Maytag gas stove, because I like to cook with gas. Now I'm cooking with gas, right? Other than that, the core components are pretty simple. When we move our show up to Stokes, which is where our next show will be coming from, Stokes County, North Carolina, in a remote location, our permanent set for Homebrew Haven, I'm going to have an indoor cooker. It's going to have a lot more BTUs to it. We're going to be using propane gas. We're going to get this thing up real hot for some of the more vigorous brews, vigorous boiling brews. Other than that, what I like to go over at this point in time, of course, I've got my Spidell, however you want to do it. This is a 7.9 gallon, a lot of headroom for a 5-gallon brew. While I'm waiting on this stuff to boil out, I've been cleaning this, and I'm getting ready to sanitize it. For the first-time brewers who are watching this show to kind of get an idea of what you do, I really cannot overstate this part enough. Prepare for your next step. We're at the boil. I've got roughly 45 minutes left on this boil, which means I'm going to need this coming up. So it helps to get it good and clean, get it good and sterilized. You want to sanitize everything. Everything is usually sitting in some Star San water. They say 5 minutes is enough. I keep it in there for a while. Doesn't affect the brew anyway, and when you pull it out, it's definitely sanitized, ready to roll. Think ahead for your next step. Now, I'm still sitting at boil right here. While this could be cooling down, I could be sanitizing that, but I want to have this ready to go so I can lock it down and start cooling it down. I use a crash process. A lot of people use a wort chiller. I don't have one. One of these days I'll have one. But while I don't have one, I use a crash process that works really good. I've got a couple of gallons of spring water in the freezer, and when this finishes, they'll be just at ice flakes, and it's basically pouring ice onto my brew, and it drops it down to right at about 100 degrees, almost like that. Crashes it, gets it down cool so we don't get any undesirable tastes, any kind of infections or anything like that. Infection's something you're going to hear a lot, you're going to read a lot, it's bad. But if you pay attention, you get a regimen, you get a routine, you can avoid infection every single time just by doing everything the same way. Once again, our next one is going to be the Simcoe. First time using this, read a lot about it, read a lot about the flavors it produces. At the 30-minute mark, we're going to be using Simcoe, and I'm going to finish off with a Columbus, 1 ounce of Columbus in the last 15 minutes. Also going to be using my Irish Moss, last 5 minutes. Then we'll be ready to crash it. And we're back. I have the Simcoe hops pellets. Getting ready to add those to the brew. We're just about at the 30-minute mark here now, which means I got about 30 minutes left on my brew. Simcoe, from what I'm told, adds a sort of a raw flavor in there to go along with this thing. At the end of the day, this thing's going to have 5 different flavors of hops in it. For you hop heads, this is going to be a good beer. For those of us who like lightly hops, it's going to be a little hoppy. But at the same time, the smells, the aromas that I have here right now are just absolutely off the chain. I'm very excited. Once again, we are using the Colorado Brewing pot. 10 gallons. Got a little motor to circulate things whenever I need them circulated. I can circulate the entire amount of wort in about 3 minutes. I use that in between, and I also stir as well. The motor is invaluable though. I think it keeps a good whole mix going on there. And that's something you can really use for the first time brewers out there. You can definitely brew like a pro as long as you can circulate the wort like this, because it is just absolutely awesome. Still hitting at about 218. We've still got a light boil, and we're at the 30-minute mark. Once again, Colorado brewing pot, 10 gallons, circulating motor. In the meantime, I've got my Spadell fermenter filled up, and I have it sanitizing as we speak. It will sanitize for roughly 30 minutes. They recommend 5 minutes minimum. I generally tend to go way over. I'm one of these sanitation freaks, if you will. Never hurts. First thing I did, first brew, I went overboard on everything to make sure it came out right, and I've just never changed since then. Some people say, well, you can sanitize them for 5 minutes, you're good to go, and you can. You most definitely, certainly can. However, if you go overboard a little bit, you don't make a $60 mistake, you don't make a $30 mistake, and you don't have all of your time wasted. We're back at the Homebrew Haven here. I'm going through the sanitation process here. This 7.9 gallons and 4 ounces is good for 5 gallons. So we're just going to bump that up to about the halfway mark. It's basically about 1 ounce per gallon, give or take. Cannot overemphasize enough sanitation, sanitation, sanitation. Even if your beer has a lower ABV, if it's sanitary, you can drink it. That's the big piece there for the newer brewers. Experienced brewers are like, okay, you're preaching to the choir, and I am. But for those people who are watching this for the first time, they're like, I want to get into home brewing, I want to do this thing. Sanitation, sanitation, sanitation. Sanitary, sanitary, sanitary. You cannot over-sanitize something. Don't even worry about that part of it. If you think you're doing too much, you're probably right on cue. So, sanitation, sanitation, sanitation. We'll be right back after this short break. We're going to be adding our next level of hops. But like I said before, this thing's going to have a good 25-30 minutes to sit here and sanitize. The water is scalding hot. And I may be going a little bit overboard. But at the same time, I haven't made a bad batch yet. Knock on prefabricated wood. But honestly, seriously, sanitary, sanitary, sanitary. If you sanitize your brew, you sanitize the equipment all the time, you're going to come out with some good brews. Now, you may not particularly like the flavor, and you can learn from that part. But if the flavor's bad because you didn't sanitize it, that's on you. New brewers, sanitize. Can't even emphasize that enough. I could spend an hour just talking about sanitizing your equipment. Absolute necessity. Don't overlook it. This is the one part of brewing that you better not shortchange, because it ruins 2-3 hours of work in 5 minutes. We'll be right back after this break, and we'll be adding our next hops. We're going to be going with the Columbus to finish out. And then, of course, like I said earlier, we're going to be dry hopping with Chinook. We'll go over dry hopping here in just a few minutes. And we're back at the Homebrew Haven. Thank you for sticking with us here. We've got 15 minutes left to go. And I am about to go with my Columbus to finish off the brew. In the meantime, I cannot say enough about the Colorado Brewing Pot. First time, actually second time all grain. And once I got all the kinks worked out from the first show, I gotta say, this thing has performed like a genius. Makes me look smarter than I really am. And at the same time, safe pot. Sitting here with my hand on it right here, not burning. Heat's down here, obviously. It's pretty hot down here, but the distribution of heat of this pot is outstanding. The motor with which you can circulate the wort pumps about 2.5 gallons a minute at this rate. I can change it, I can adjust it with the valve here, but I've got it at that 2.5 gallon rate here because I want to circulate the wort up real good, get all these hops all mixed together for this final 15 minutes. Within about 5 minutes, I'm going to be adding my Irish moss, and then we're going to be shutting it down, getting it ready to head to the fermenter. Going to be crashing it, and other than that, I think we're well on our way to some good beer. This is going to be a Jade IPA. I added a little bit of oatmeal in there for texture and flavor, and frankly, because I like it. That's the main reason. You will, on your brewing side, for those of you who are watching this for the first time, you will develop flavors that you like, and that's what you will make. I really recommend making a lot of different brews because at the same time you have to find your flavor. Mine, I started off with, I was a stout guy, then I became an ale guy. I didn't really like chocolate to begin with, but once I figured out how to do it, I love it. Oatmeal wasn't my bag either, but there again, once I figured it out, once I figured out the brewing side of it, ever since then, I'm sort of using it in just about every brew that I make. And you'll find that as you get into the brewing cycles, as you get into making more than just one brew, you'll find your flavor. For me, it's chocolate, oatmeal, in just about everything that I do. This will still have sort of a jadish IPA to it because of all the hops and because of, in essence, all the hops, the brewing, and the actual grains that I did use. We'll be going over the ingredients list here at the end of the show. Be sure to check out our sponsors. They do a wonderful job. Everything else generally is done out of pocket. We have a very small budget, as you can tell. Colorado Brewing did give me a break on the pot to start with because they didn't know how this was going to work out. I didn't know how it was going to work out either. But so far, so good. I'm excited. We'll be right back. Thanks for sticking with us here at the Homebrew Haven. And we're back at the Homebrew Haven here. I'm going to give you a quick word about the yeast I'm going to be pitching for this today. It's a South Brew Abaya. That's the best way I can pronounce it. This is for your higher ABV beers. It's blended specially for up to 11%. I just saw this the other day, looked at it, looked it over, looked at the stats, and this hits about where I want to be doing it. It is rather large. It's made for up to 7 gallons. This is the yeast that I'm going to be pitching. Look it up, and I'll have a link to this at the end of the show as well. And we're back at the Homebrew Haven. I've got about 15 minutes left of my mash out time. So far, so good. Everything is actually working much better than it did last week. Water's circulating without a problem. I'm holding a regular water level. Everything's good. So what we're doing right now is I'm just mashing, but I'm also starting my grains to keep them kind of moving around a little bit. I have the max grain level for this basket, roughly about 13 pounds total. 10-gallon pot. We're going to make about 5 gallons when it's all said and done. Overall, for the all-grain brewer, someone who wants to strike out with all grain first, or if you've done a lot of extract brews and you want to make your mark with an all-grain brew, This is definitely a good pot to start with. Um, Time will tell if it's a usable, love that word, usable pot. Right now, I would say I'm probably at about 75% efficiency on the grains because they're not all circulating that well just yet, and that's probably user error on my part. But from what I can see inside, everything so far seems to be circulating really well. I'm pretty sure that the hot water has touched every bit of the grains because they keep moving up. Sort of the circulating pattern here is it blows the grains up and then smacks them back down with the water. So it's working right exactly as intended. And I've got roughly about 10 more minutes on this mash out here, and then we're going to be ready to boil. And if you have any questions, don't forget to email us at matthew@homebrewhaven.com or matthew@cornerstonebrewery.com. In the process, I would have to say that this is probably the easiest brew that I have done. And I've done a lot of brews. This is going to be about 160 for me. I've done a lot of extract brews and things of that nature, partial mash brews, so on and so forth. This is actually the easiest brew I have ever done. And for me to say that, I've had some that went through. I did 5 batches in one day just because I could. This one is going along so far very easy. I'm very happy with it. Definitely thumbs up for a buy on this. Total was about a little over 500 after tax. Took him about 4 weeks to get it ready. He got it to me rather promptly, and we're just getting started with it. Thank you for joining us back at the Homebrew Haven. I am now getting ready to sparge this. I've got roughly about a minute left. I'm sanitizing the bucket. I'm going to catch the wort, what we have right now, in that bucket so I can drain it off with the grains in here. I'm going to try to make this a little easier on myself than I did the last time. And that sound says that we are ready to be done. Welcome back to Homebrew Haven. I am your host, Matthew. We are working with a Colorado brew pot, 10 gallons. And we are draining the grains as we speak right now. The motor is not running. I have drained most of the wort into a food-safe bowl, bucket down below me. And as soon as these grains drain off just a little bit more, then we are going to be ready to boil. What I did this week as opposed to last week I tried to move all this stuff and leave the water in, and what I have found as a workaround for that is instead of picking up the basket and making a mess all over creation, I went and bought a food safe bucket and I drained all the wort out into the food safe bucket. It takes probably about, give or take, 30 pounds of water out of there. Plus, it allows a space for the grains to evenly drain. So what will happen is here in just a few minutes, the grains will drain completely down because it did take roughly about 5-10 minutes to drain everything down. In the meanwhile, I still have my good hot wort over here, no chance of infection. And in just a minute, I can slide this thing over, take the grain basket out, and remove it, and we'll be ready to boil. That is a change from last week, and what I would recommend for the first-time brewer, unless you have ample space to work with, large buckets and all kinds of cool stuff, this is probably the best way to go with this particular setup. We're going to go over the basket removal for this system. Now, here's where it gets a little complicated, and the only way that I've been able to do this successfully is because I messed it up grossly the last time. So I am going to attempt a different method. Now, as we showed in the previous section, I went ahead and drained the fluid down. Went ahead and drained everything down. The bucket's been draining now for about 5 minutes. I went ahead and sparged it a little bit, made sure. And as soon as I heard a good clear flow of water hitting the bottom of the pot, I said, well, you know what, it's time to go ahead and pull the basket. So that's what we're getting ready to do now. I'm going to go through the process with you so you can actually see what you're getting yourself into here. I would strongly recommend maybe a jack of some sort because this basket is heavy. Obviously, it's got the grains are still wet and there's still at least 14 pounds of total grain in there. 2 pounds of chocolate, 2 pounds of oatmeal, 10 pounds of initial grains. And we got to get them out and over to a pan without hopefully making an absolute mess. And if you're home brewing in the kitchen, your wife or your significant other will certainly not appreciate this. So best move is to try to make it as clean as possible. Hence, I went ahead and did the drain beforehand. So now we're going to go through the process of getting the basket out. We have to get the basket out so that we can go to the boil section. So I use a ladder. I'm kind of what you call height challenge, which is everyone that knows me knows that. So that's what we're getting ready to do now. Got my pan sitting over here to catch for this. This pan here is the exact size that it takes to hold the basket in. That was definitely not as bad as it was the last time. Very, very little mess at all. So when we come back, we'll be ready to hit our boil section here on Homebrew Haven. Thank you for sticking with us. And welcome back to the Homebrew Haven. I am now heating up my wort. We've got a little ways to go, but not too far. It's still sitting at about 158. Which is impressive considering it took me probably about 5-10 minutes to get the basket out. I gotta say, loving this pot. Probably not a bad buy for anybody who's looking to get into all grain brew, looking to get into partial mash. I did a partial mash last week. Other than that, it's very efficient. I'm saying right now, looking at the pan I had out there, I got maybe a quart of used wort that didn't quite make it back into the bucket. Otherwise, we're working with roughly 5 gallons right now. We got to get 5 gallons up to boiling temperature. We've got a ways to go, but we'll get there. And I appreciate you sticking with us here at the Homebrew Haven, where we try to show you a little bit of something, we try to have a little bit of fun, and most importantly, we make beer. Thank you for joining us back on the Homebrew Haven. I am your host, Matthew. We are once again using a Colorado brew pot from Colorado Brewing. You should see the link popping up here pretty soon. We're going to add a little bit of brown sugar to the mix here, sort of to up the ABV part of this, and to darken it up just a little bit more, and to kind of help out with the chocolate and everything else. We're currently sitting at about 180, so we're about 40 degrees away from boiling, but we're getting there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of the wort, and I'm going to mix it up with some brown sugar here. Then I'm going to add it back into the pot. I have sanitized the cup. I do have 8 ounces of brown sugar. I'm going to add it in there, make a nice thick syrupy mix. And from there, we're going to add it right back in to the brew. It sort of sweetens it up just a little bit, but what it does, in essence, is it dries it out some as well. This is an advanced brewing technique. It really works and it really tastes good. See, at the end of this, we're going to add about 2 to 3 ounces of blackberry into the wort at bottling time to add the rest of it in there, because I wanted a little bit of a fruity beer to go along with all these hops. I think we're going to come out with a winner with this one. We'll be right back in just a few minutes take a look at some of our sponsors. They keep the show going. We're back on the Homebrew Haven. No, this is not a cup of coffee. This is the wort with the brown sugar mixing in right now. I'm giving it a solid stir. In the meantime, I have my circulating engine circulating the wort right now for two reasons. Number one, it speeds up the boil because it keeps the water moving at an even temperature. And number two, it keeps everything circulating out right. And as you can see in the pot here, we've got it's malting up a little bit, but we're about to add the piece de resistance, if you will. This is 8 ounces of brown sugar mixed in with the wort. As a side item, what I have been doing during the course of the show here in between takes is I've been doing some cleaning. Now, for first-time brewers, you may not appreciate this part just yet until you brew your first batch. After you brewed your first batch, you will definitely appreciate the cleanup part of it. I know I certainly do. If I can give you any kind of a hint or recommendation going forward, if you're watching this and you're thinking you want to get into brewing, you're thinking that's what you want to do, sounds like fun, all your friends are doing it, I cannot overemphasize enough, clean as you go. This process here, especially with the all grain, now if you're working with an extract, the extract is not going to take as long as an all grain. You don't have the mash out, you don't have the sparge, you don't have all of that. You just heat up some water, get it to a boil, put your hops in, let it cool down, cool it and pitch it. You're looking at a couple hours. If you're doing an all grain brew, it's literally minus the wait for the boil and everything else. I'm looking at about 3 hours of turnaround time, and you're tired. So the one thing I can tell you right away, clean as you go. You've got plenty of time. I am still roughly about 30 degrees away from boiling as it is. We're going to do a soft boil on this one like I did on the last one. Not going to get a vigorous boil going. But I'm literally looking at another 30 degrees. I can be cleaning my equipment in the meantime. So when I'm done, there's very minimal cleanup left, and I'm done for the night. So one thing I can recommend to you wholeheartedly, clean as you go. You will appreciate that one comment right there. Welcome back to the Homebrew Haven. I'm your host, Matthew, and we have a boil here with the Colorado Brew Pot sent to us from Colorado Brewing. We do thank you for your timely attention to the order. I'm at a brew point now. I'm getting ready to set my timer. I wanted to talk about the hops I'm getting ready to drop in here a little bit at a time. We have Cascade, Centennial, new hop for me, Simcoe. Then we're going to be finishing out with Columbus, and I'm going to be dry hopping it with Chinook. I know that's a little bit backwards from what you think, but I do come out with a good flavor. No one's complained as of yet, and I don't think they're going to start. We'll be right back. We're going to be setting the timer, and we're going to be adding hops. This is a great thing. We're at the boiling point now. It's at 210 roughly by the thermometer, but I've got a pretty soft boil going right now, and that's how I like to do mine. I don't particularly care for a vigorous boil, but when we come right back, we're going to have our timer set, and we're going to be adding our hops. I'm going to start with a Centennial. I like to start with Centennial, and to me, it just gives it a better flavor. It's my preference. It may not be your preference, but that's okay. For the new brewer, there are some tables available as to what works well together. If you're wondering what will work for you and what won't, go ahead and follow that table. It's worked for me when I was first starting out, and I'm sure it'll work for you as well. I'll be providing a link to that at the end of the show as well. We'll be right back, and thanks for sticking with us. This has been an exciting day for me. Our inaugural show for the Homebrew Haven, our first episode for release. And we're back at the Homebrew Haven. We're coming down in the last 5 minutes. I do have my Irish moss in here, and I'm going to be adding that in next. Now, as I did say before, when I do add something, I do tend to circulate it. When you have the motor, and the motor is very good at circulating, I highly recommend using that. We're coming down on 5 minutes now, and I'm circulating the brew. It is still hitting at about 218, and believe it or not, the tubing that I'm using is not really that hot. I do have to keep swapping every so often. But overall, it's very temperature controlled as well. But if I go at it for about 2 minutes, it completely circulates all of the wort. We're going to show you how to finish this brew off. Welcome back to the Homebrew Haven. We are coming down to the last 2 minutes of the brew, to the boil. And once again, I have elected to go with a soft boil for this particular beer. You may at some point in time want a vigorous boil. Just a moment. And that sound actually indicates that our brew should be done. So I'm going to go ahead and kill the heat to it. In the meantime, I am draining the fermenter. Now, people say you shouldn't waste the water that comes with it. I did manage to save some of it, and I'll explain that in a minute. I'm saving that for the big head for the fermenter. This is the airlock provided by Spinell. Very huge. Takes a little bit of water to get it up to there. And quite frankly, it is one of the best airlocks I've ever used. Back into the sanitized water. Once again, I said you cannot sanitize enough. You cannot sanitize enough. When we come back, we're going to be draining this out into the fermenter, and that will conclude our show. I'm going to go over crashing it. I do have the water still in the freezer. It will be at least 32 degrees, and I will crash with some ice water. We'll be right back, and thanks for sticking with us. And we're back at the Homebrew Haven now. I'm getting ready to unload. What I'm going to do next, I'm going to get a little cheesecloth to filter out all of the hops and everything else, kind of keep that filtered out of here. And from there, we're going to crash the brew. I've got 2 gallons of ice water, literally, crystal geyser. Got about 4 gallons in here. This is going to go a little over 5 gallons, but I added a couple of pounds of chocolate, and I also added a couple of pounds of oatmeal in there to make up for the extra. And we're back at the Homebrew Haven now. As you can tell, I've got some cheesecloth here. I'm going to put it over that. Basically, this is going to catch the hops, and it's going to try to filter out any of the other stuff that's in there. We're about ready to turn it loose. Here we go. There we go. A little bit hot. But it is definitely accomplishing what I set out to accomplish. Oh my goodness gracious. We're going to leave the cameras running here. I did have a little bit of an accident down there on the floor, nothing I can't clean up. As a general rule, since this is the first real accident I've had, we probably want to make sure that we have the valve closed, as I hear that would be a help. I'm also going to tie this in a knot right here, so that they can actually hold it. I don't have to hold it. Don't have to get my hands in there, because that is kind of hot coming out of there. And we're back at the Homebrew Haven. Thanks for sticking with us here. I have my ice water. And as we saw before, it's a pretty hot ward here. So now we're going to crash it. Alright, that gets the water out of that one. Already you can tell a difference. And we're going to add that last bottle of ice water. Alright, got that down. Now, what we would do next is take a pair of scissors and cut the top out of this and then just pour the ice directly into it. Be right back and for some final thoughts here at the Homebrew Haven. Thanks for sticking with us. Here we are with our finished product. It has already cooled down significantly. Just the crash did it. That got it under the temperature where we're worried about contamination. Welcome back to the Homebrew Haven. Right now I'm getting my cap lead, which has been soaking in the sanitizer. We're going to put that down there. Then we're going to put this on here. That'll lock that down. Alright, now that we've got that locked down, we're going to go ahead and put our sanitized cap on there. It's okay if you get a drip or two of sanitized water in, because it will not hurt your brew. Now I'm going to go ahead and dry this off. This rag is, of course, sanitized. You say, how do you do that? Well, you just dip it in sanitized water and let it dry out a minute, and you've got a sanitized rag. That's going to do it today here at the Homebrew Haven. We have roughly about 4 gallons, which is what I generally will make. I've got a pretty high head end here. I'm going to be adding the Chinook at the end here. I'm going to dry hop it with that. I'm going to let that sit for roughly about 8 days. And this is going to be ready to bottle. I'd like to thank all of our sponsors, everybody who makes this show possible. I'd like to thank everyone who stuck with us to the end. It is definitely an undertaking. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Mainly, though, thank you for your support. Your views help me more than anything in the world, and helps get the message out there. I want to create more home brewers. I want to show you that, even if you're not as great at it as everybody else is, you can still do good things with your brews. And you can be creative. See, this is very cool now. Very cool. I'm going to crash it in a tub of ice water here in just a minute. And we'll be ready to pitch that yeast I was showing you earlier, the Saf-Al, which happens to be my yeast of choice. You may have others. I just find it to be very useful, very helpful. Just thank you. Thank you all. Until next time, there's no better beer than a homebrew beer. As long as you brew, you never run out of friends. We'll see you next month at the Homebrew Haven.